This building here, until recently was known as the 1YA building here at the top of Shortland Street. Was probably one of the more iconic buildings in Auckland when it was first built. It's got a massive antenna mast on the roof, which is still there, thankfully, as a protected feature. I think it used to be described as Auckland's Eiffel Tower, which is quite nice. It was built in 1935. At the peak of the Depression, the first Labour government came in with an incredibly strong social program, and as part of that social program, public radio was one of its key platforms. And so this building here was built as, although there was radio until that point, this was the first purpose-built public radio facility in New Zealand in 1935. So there's a really strong social legacy in the bricks and mortar behind us. And it remained the base for 1YA and other broadcasters until 1960 when TV came around in New Zealand, and then it became, in its various entities, New Zealand Broadcasting Corporation, TVNZ, etc., until the 80s when TVNZ was privatised. We get a lot of stories. One of the nice things about being based in such an iconic building with such a long history is people always come back. Like hardly a week passes where someone doesn't just walk into the lobby and say, well, I used to work here 30 years ago and I just wanted to see what the place looks like now or what's happening. People come in, and I always make a point, if I spot them and I have the time, to talk to them. What did you do? When were you here? Oh, I was in makeup. You know, the office you were in before it was studios, that used to be the boys' toilets. And at the time, the 1930s is also the time, you have to remember, the Civic was built around then as well. Coming out of the Depression, there were these great entertainment centres. Cinema was the great escape. You can go in and have this fantastic experience in this glorious space. It was total escapism. So the Civic's probably another incarnation of this kind of architecture. Not so much radio, because you didn't come in to be entertained here, you listened at home. But nevertheless, there's examples of similar buildings around the world from the same era, movie houses and radio facilities, broadcasting sorts of places, which have quite similar characteristics. They're sort of great temples of entertainment, I guess. I guess one of the other big broadcasting houses in Auckland, which sadly wasn't saved, was the 1ZB building. And we've got images of it inside this building. There's some old period photos with incredible spiralling staircases and inlaid floors with the logo and so on. And that one didn't survive. I think it went in the boom of the 80s when everything was being privatised. And there was this weird event where public broadcasting has become this weird beast where it's meant to deliver financial results to the shareholders, so to speak, and it's meant to be a public thing, but it's also meant to be run as a commercial enterprise, and yet the commercial side of the business was sold off years ago. And the really bizarre thing that happened is that there was a point where what is now Radio New Zealand was all sectioned off, and the commercial stations like ZB and so on became a separate entity that was sold, and what was left was Concert FM and Radio New Zealand, National Radio, and some of those more publicly spirited things that they probably couldn't make money off. And the way I like to describe it, the analogy is there was a divorce in public radio and the commercial arm got to keep the house. Radio New Zealand ended up in this weird position of leasing its own building off its former siblings.